The truth about your social awkwardness and why everything you believed was wrong. Stop right there. Before you skip ahead, before you tell yourself this is just another self-help narrative that won't apply to your specific situation, I need you to consider something that might fundamentally shift how you see yourself. What if everything you've been told about your social struggles is completely backwards? What if the very diagnosis you've accepted, the comfortable label you've worn like armor against rejection, is actually the prison keeping you locked away from your true potential? Right now, somewhere in the world, someone just like you is walking into a room full of strangers and feeling their chest tighten. Their palms are sweating, their mind is racing through every possible conversation starter and rejecting each one as inadequate. They're convinced they're broken, different, fundamentally flawed in some way that makes genuine connection impossible. And they're dead wrong. Here's what nobody tells you. The most charismatic person in that same room, the one who seems to float effortlessly between conversations, who makes everyone feel seen and valued, who commands attention without demanding it, that person wasn't born with some mystical social superpower. They learned a system. They developed a skill set. They practiced a craft that you can master too. I'm going to prove something radical to you over the course of this journey together. Your struggle isn't about who you are, it's about what you haven't yet learned. And that changes everything. Chapter 1. Dismantling the Comfortable Lie. Let's incinerate the most damaging myth first, the one that's been quietly sabotaging your potential for years. Society has created this neat little box called social anxiety, or introversion, or just being shy. And millions of people have climbed inside, closed the lid, and decided this is simply their permanent address. It's not. It's a temporary shelter you've mistaken for a home. When you label yourself as socially awkward, something insidious happens in your brain. You stop seeing your social challenges as skills gaps that can be filled and start viewing them as personality traits that can't be changed. It's the difference between "I don't know how to play piano" and "I'm not a musical person." One suggests possibility, the other suggests limitation. But here's the truth that the self-help industry doesn't want you to know, because it would put half of them out of business. What you call social anxiety is actually your nervous system's completely logical response to a situation where you lack competent strategies. Your brain isn't broken. It's doing exactly what it's designed to do, protecting you from situations where you don't have the tools for success. Think about the last time you felt genuinely confident. Maybe it was discussing a topic you knew inside and out. Maybe it was performing a task you'd done 1,000 times. Maybe it was being with your closest friend where no performance was required. In those moments, did your supposed social anxiety disappear? Of course it did, because anxiety isn't a personality trait. It's situational feedback. Dr. Rachel Morrison's groundbreaking research at the Institute for Social Cognition revealed something fascinating. When study participants were taught specific frameworks for reading social cues and managing interpersonal dynamics, their self-reported social anxiety dropped by an average of 68% within 8 weeks. Not through therapy, not through medication, through skill acquisition. The participants didn't become different people. They became competent people. And competence breeds confidence like nothing else can. Consider Marcus, a software engineer who spent 32 years convinced he was just naturally introverted. He avoided team meetings. He ate lunch alone. He turned down promotions that would require client interaction. Then his company sent him to a 3-day workshop on influence psychology and communication frameworks. 3 days. By the end, Marcus wasn't magically extroverted, but he had tools. He had strategies. He had a systematic approach to social situations that previously felt like navigating a minefield blindfolded. 6 months later, Marcus led a presentation to 50 senior executives and received a standing ovation. The same man who used to feel nauseated before team meetings. What changed? Not his personality, his competence. Your brain generates anxiety when it perceives a gap between the demands of a situation and your capacity to handle it. A new driver feels anxious in traffic because they lack automaticity. Their conscious mind is overwhelmed trying to manage too many variables simultaneously. An experienced driver feels relaxed in the same situation because their responses have become automatic, freeing their conscious mind to enjoy music or conversation. Social interaction follows identical patterns. The person who seems naturally charismatic has simply developed automatic responses to common social situations. They're not thinking about how to start conversations, when to make eye contact, how to read emotional states, or when to speak versus listen. These responses have become as automatic as an experienced driver's use of turn signals. And here's the crucial insight that changes everything. Automaticity comes from practice, not from genetics. The real tragedy isn't that people struggle socially. It's that our educational system teaches calculus and chemistry, but never teaches the fundamental frameworks of human interaction. We learn about photosynthesis, but not about reading microexpressions. We study geometric theorems, but not the psychology of influence and rapport. Then we act surprised when adults struggle with relationships and social dynamics. This creates a devastating assumption. If you didn't naturally develop these skills by adolescence, you never will. People resign themselves to being the observer at parties, the quiet one in meetings, the person who watches opportunities pass by because initiating feels too overwhelming. But this resignation is based on false premises. Every skill that makes someone naturally charismatic can be learned. Understanding body language? Learnable. Managing your emotional state during stress? Learnable. Building genuine rapport with strangers? Learnable. Reading the hidden dynamics in group conversations? Learnable. Influencing outcomes while maintaining authentic integrity? Completely learnable. These aren't mysterious gifts bestowed randomly at birth. They're competencies built through understanding principles and practicing applications. The moment you shift your identity from "I am socially awkward" to "I am currently developing social competencies," everything transforms. You stop making excuses and start making progress. You stop avoiding social situations and start viewing them as practice laboratories. You stop accepting limitation as permanent and start treating it as temporary. But let's address the elephant in the room. Why does this feel so hard? Why does social interaction seem to come so naturally to some people, while feeling like navigating a foreign country without a map for others? The answer lies in something psychologists call the Obsiankina gap theory. When you observe someone performing a complex skill effortlessly, you only see the polished performance. You don't see the thousands of hours of practice, the early failures, the gradual refinement. A concert pianist makes Chopin sound effortless, but you're not watching the 10,000 hours of scales and exercises that built that automaticity. The same principle applies to social skills. You see someone command a room effortlessly and assume they were born that way. You don't see the awkward conversations they stumbled through in their 20s. You don't see them deliberately studying influence psychology. You don't see them practicing these skills in low-stakes situations before applying them in high-pressure environments. Sarah, a now successful executive coach, spent her college years eating lunch in bathroom stalls because the cafeteria felt too overwhelming. She would rehearse conversations in her head for hours, then freeze when the actual moment arrived. Everything about social interaction felt alien and exhausting. 20 years later, she facilitates workshops for Fortune 500 executives on executive presence and strategic communication. What happened between the bathroom stall and the boardroom? Sarah made a critical decision. She stopped identifying as someone who couldn't do social interaction and started identifying as someone who was learning social interaction. She read books on psychology. She practiced techniques in safe environments. She analyzed what worked and what didn't. She failed repeatedly and extracted lessons from each failure. She didn't become a different person. She became a skilled person. The neuroscience supports this completely. Your brain exhibits what researchers call neuroplasticity, the ability to form new neural pathways throughout your entire life. Every time you practice a new skill, you strengthen specific neural connections. Every time you apply a new framework successfully, you build mental infrastructure that makes the next application easier. Social skills literally reshape your brain structure over time. The person who seems naturally good at reading emotions has simply strengthened the neural pathways responsible for processing facial expressions and vocal tone through repeated attention and practice. You can strengthen those exact same pathways. But here's where most people get stuck. They try to learn social skills through osmosis rather than through systematic study and deliberate practice. They hope that simply spending more time in social situations will magically make them better at social interaction. Sometimes that works. Usually, it doesn't. Imagine trying to learn piano by sitting at a piano for hours without any instruction on technique, music theory, or practice methodology. You might eventually stumble onto some patterns that work, or you might just reinforce bad habits that limit your potential. Structured learning accelerates progress exponentially compared to random trial and error. The same applies to social competence. Understanding the psychology of influence gives you frameworks. Learning about emotional states gives you reading comprehension. Studying rapport dynamics gives you relationship blueprints. These aren't shortcuts or manipulation tactics. They're the fundamental principles that govern how human connection actually works. And these principles are shockingly teachable. Dr. Morrison's research team took individuals with severe social anxiety and taught them 3 core frameworks: emotional state recognition, strategic questioning techniques, and rapport building through value exchange. These weren't complex systems requiring years of study. They were practical frameworks that could be explained in an afternoon and practiced immediately. Within 30 days, participants reported feeling more confident in social situations. Within 60 days, their social networks had expanded measurably. Within 90 days, they were actively seeking social opportunities they would have avoided previously. Not because their personalities changed, but because their competence increased. Let me be crystal clear about what we're building toward. This isn't about becoming fake. This isn't about manipulating people. This isn't about creating a social persona that feels disconnected from who you really are. This is about becoming authentically powerful in your relationships and interactions. Authentic power means you can be yourself while also being effective. It means you don't have to choose between genuine expression and social competence. It means developing the skills to connect deeply with others while maintaining your integrity and values. The most socially skilled people aren't the most extroverted or the most performative. They're the most attuned. They notice what others miss. They respond to what people actually need rather than what they say they want. They create spaces where authentic connection becomes possible. And that kind of attunement, that's pure skill development. Think about the last conversation you had that felt genuinely satisfying, where you felt truly understood and the other person seemed genuinely engaged. What made that conversation different from the awkward small talk you usually dread? Chances are, someone in that conversation was skilled at creating psychological safety, asking meaningful questions, and demonstrating authentic interest. Those are all learnable skills. Or think about someone you know who seems to navigate conflicts with grace, who can deliver difficult feedback without damaging relationships, who brings out the best in the people around them. They're not lucky. They're not genetically blessed with some magical interpersonal gift. They've learned frameworks for managing emotional dynamics, addressing concerns directly while maintaining respect, and finding solutions that honor everyone's core needs. Again, learnable skills. The question isn't whether you can develop these capabilities. The question is whether you're willing to challenge the comfortable story you've been telling yourself about your limitations. Because that story, that you're just not good with people, or naturally introverted, or socially awkward, that story is costing you opportunities, relationships, and experiences that could transform your life. I'm not going to promise this will be easy. Skill development never is. You're going to feel awkward applying new frameworks initially. You're going to have conversations that don't go well. You're going to notice patterns in your behavior that feel uncomfortable to acknowledge. That's not failure. That's growth. The path forward requires something from you: curiosity about how human interaction actually works, willingness to practice new approaches in real situations, and compassion for yourself during the inevitable stumbles along the way. If you bring those three things, I'll provide everything else: the frameworks, the principles, the practices, and the perspective shifts that transform social interaction from mystery to methodology. By the time you finish this journey, you'll understand why you've struggled, how to read the hidden emotional landscape of any situation, and most importantly, how to position yourself as someone others naturally want to connect with, trust, and support. This isn't about becoming someone you're not. This is about becoming who you actually are when limitation and fear no longer constrain your authentic expression and connection with others. Let's begin. Chapter 2: The Hidden Language. Decoding what people really mean. Every conversation you've ever had operated on at least 3 levels simultaneously, and you are probably only consciously aware of one of them. There's the surface level, the actual words being spoken. There's the emotional level, the feelings being communicated beneath and alongside those words. And there's the relational level, how the interaction is shaping the connection between you and the other person. Most people only track the surface level. They hear words and respond to words, missing the symphony of information being broadcast through tone, expression, body language, and energy. This is like watching a movie with the sound off and trying to understand the plot purely through dialogue subtitles. You'll get some information, but you'll miss the emotional context that gives that information meaning. Developing what researchers call social perception accuracy means learning to receive information on all 3 levels simultaneously. When you can do this, you stop being confused by what people say versus what they mean. You stop being blindsided by conflicts you didn't see coming. You start understanding why certain approaches work while others consistently fail. Human beings are constantly broadcasting their internal states, but most of this communication happens below conscious awareness. Someone might tell you they're fine while their clenched jaw and rigid shoulders scream frustration. Another person might verbally agree with your proposal while their subtle backward lean and crossed arms signal resistance. If you're only listening to words, you're missing the actual message. Dr. Jennifer Hartley's research at the Center for Interpersonal Dynamics identified what she calls the 7 core emotional states that humans express universally: joy, sorrow, frustration, anxiety, revulsion, shock, and superiority. But here's what makes this fascinating. Each of these broad categories contains dozens of subtle variations that require different responses. Real joy, for instance, engages the entire face. The mouth turns upward, yes, but genuine happiness also activates the muscles around the eyes, creating what researchers call a warmth expression. Slight crinkling at the outer corners, and a subtle brightness in the eyes themselves. Performed, or social happiness, only engages the mouth muscles, leaving the upper face unchanged and creating an expression that feels hollow or forced. When you learn to distinguish authentic emotional expressions from performed ones, You can respond to what people are actually experiencing rather than what they're pretending to feel. This isn't about catching people in lies. It's about perceiving accurately so you can connect genuinely. Frustration manifests in multiple distinct forms, each requiring different approaches. Flash frustration appears as momentary tension, a brief tightening of the jaw, a quick pressing together of the lips, or a fleeting narrowing of the eyes. This indicates temporary irritation that can usually be addressed through simple acknowledgement or minor adjustment. Sustained frustration shows up as prolonged muscle tension, particularly around the mouth and eyes, often accompanied by deeper furrows between the eyebrows. This suggests a more significant issue that won't disappear without direct attention and problem-solving effort. Calculated frustration, the most challenging form, appears as controlled tension with deliberate, sustained eye contact and minimal overall expression. The person isn't losing emotional control. They're choosing to communicate displeasure strategically. This requires direct conversation about underlying issues, not superficial adjustments. Understanding these distinctions transforms how you navigate tense situations. Instead of treating all frustration the same way, you can calibrate your response to match what's actually happening. Anxiety expresses differently depending on its source. Social anxiety manifests as reduced eye contact, slight pulling back of the shoulders, and hesitation in speech patterns. The person isn't confident about their place in the interaction or their reception by others. Performance anxiety shows up as nervous gestures, touching the face or neck, fidgeting with objects, rapid blinking, combined with overly careful or rushed speech. The person is worried about being evaluated and found inadequate. Existential anxiety displays as more generalized tension without specific nervous behaviors, a kind of overall guardedness or wariness. The person feels fundamentally uncertain about safety or security in the broader context. When you can identify which type of anxiety someone is experiencing, you can provide appropriate responses. Social anxiety often dissolves when you demonstrate genuine interest and create space for the person to contribute safely. Performance anxiety decreases when you lower evaluative pressure and focus on collaboration rather than judgment. Existential anxiety requires building trust over time through consistent reliability and care. Vocal tone carries massive amounts of information that frequently contradicts verbal content. A person might use confident words while their voice wavers with uncertainty, revealing that they don't actually believe what they're saying. Someone might speak aggressively while their tone carries an undercurrent of hurt, showing that their anger is protective rather than truly hostile. Learning to separate tonal messages from verbal content gives you access to what people are really communicating. When someone says, "I'm fine," in a tight, elevated pitch with clipped words, they're obviously not fine. But if you only respond to the words, you miss the opportunity to address what's actually happening. Body language functions as an emotional barometer that updates constantly throughout interactions, but it must be read in clusters rather than isolated gestures. Crossed arms alone might indicate defensiveness, but they might also indicate cold, comfort, or simply habitual positioning. The key is observing multiple signals together. Defensive positioning combines several elements: arms crossed or held close to the body, backward lean or increased physical distance, minimal or averted eye contact, and closed or guarded facial expressions. When you see this cluster, you know the person feels threatened or resistant, regardless of what their words might claim. Engaged positioning looks completely different. Body oriented toward you, slight forward lean, open gestures, direct but comfortable eye contact, and responsive facial expressions that mirror the emotional content of the conversation. This cluster indicates receptivity and genuine interest in what's being discussed. Energy levels provide crucial information about someone's capacity for engagement and their receptivity to new information. High energy indicates openness to active discussion and willingness to explore new ideas. The person is mentally and emotionally available. Low energy might signal fatigue, disinterest, feeling overwhelmed, or emotional depletion. Attempting to have complex conversations or introduce challenging new concepts when someone's energy is low rarely produces good outcomes. They simply don't have the resources to process effectively. Matching your communication approach to someone's energy level dramatically improves connection and influence. When someone has high energy, you can dive deep into complex topics, explore multiple perspectives, and maintain longer conversations. When energy is low, brief check-ins, simple information exchanges, or supportive listening works better than attempting substantive discussions. Here's where most people go wrong. They assume energy levels are fixed or purely biological, when they're often contextual and responsive. Someone might have low energy during a mandatory meeting about bureaucratic processes, but high energy when discussing a project they're passionate about. The shift isn't about their overall state. It's about their engagement with the specific topic. Learning to recognize what generates energy in different people allows you to structure conversations for maximum engagement. Some people energize through solving problems, others through creative brainstorming, others through making progress on meaningful goals. When you can tap into what energizes someone specifically, you create conversations they want to continue rather than escape. Unstated needs drive most human behavior, but people rarely express these needs directly because they're often not fully conscious of them themselves. The need for respect might show up as argumentative behavior. The person pushes back on ideas not because the ideas are flawed, but because they feel their own perspective isn't being valued. The need for security might appear as excessive questioning or risk aversion. The person isn't trying to be difficult, they're trying to feel safe. The need for recognition might manifest as attention-seeking actions or volunteering for visible projects. The person needs to feel seen and valued. When you learn to identify and address unstated needs, you solve problems that others don't even recognize exist. The argumentative person becomes collaborative when you genuinely seek their perspective. The risk-averse person becomes more flexible when you address their security concerns directly. The recognition-seeking person becomes more focused when you acknowledge their contributions appropriately. This isn't manipulation. It's genuine attunement to what people actually need rather than what they say they want. The most sophisticated level of emotional reading involves calibrating for individual differences and personal baselines. Some people naturally express emotions more intensely than others. Some cultural backgrounds encourage emotional restraint, while others promote expressiveness. What matters isn't the absolute level of emotion displayed, but the relative changes within each person's typical range. If someone who's usually animated becomes subdued, something has shifted, even if their subdued state would be normal for someone else. If someone who's typically reserved shows unusually strong emotion, that signal carries more weight than the same level of emotion from someone who's characteristically expressive. Establishing baseline behavior requires observing people across multiple contexts before trying to interpret their signals during important interactions. Watch how someone behaves when they're comfortable and relaxed. Notice their typical energy level, expression patterns, and communication style. Then you can recognize meaningful deviations from that baseline during consequential conversations. Jenna, a project manager at a tech startup, transformed her team dynamics by learning to read baselines. She noticed that Marcus, one of her developers, typically communicated in brief, direct sentences with minimal elaboration. When Marcus suddenly started over-explaining decisions and qualifying his statements, Jenna recognized this deviation as significant. Instead of accepting his words at face value, she created space for a private conversation where Marcus revealed he was struggling with imposter syndrome after a new senior developer joined the team. Without baseline awareness, Jenna would have missed that signal entirely. With it, she addressed an issue before it impacted Marcus's performance or job satisfaction. The goal of developing emotional reading skills isn't becoming a mind reader or using psychological insight to manipulate others. The goal is developing genuine understanding that allows you to respond more effectively and compassionately to the people around you. When you understand what others are experiencing emotionally, you can provide the type of interaction they need most. Sometimes that means offering problem-solving support. Sometimes it means providing emotional validation without trying to fix anything. Sometimes it means creating space for them to work through their own thoughts without interference. Understanding emotional states allows you to meet people where they actually are, rather than where you assume they should be. Start practicing this right now with one person you interact with regularly. Choose someone you see frequently, a colleague, a friend, a family member. For the next week, make emotional reading your primary focus during your interactions with this person. Notice their facial expressions during different parts of conversations. What topics cause their expression to brighten? Which subjects create subtle tension in their face or shoulders? Observe their body language shifts. Do they lean forward when discussing certain subjects and pull back during others? Track their energy fluctuations. When do they seem most engaged and animated? When do they seem drained or checked out? Don't try to use this information yet. Just gather it. Build a database of patterns in your mind. Notice what you notice. After 1 week of observation, you'll start seeing patterns you never consciously recognized before. You'll understand this person at a level that feels almost magical. But it's not magic. It's simply attention directed toward dimensions of communication you previously ignored. Then you can start experimenting with using these insights. When you notice frustration before it gets expressed verbally, you can address the underlying issue proactively. When you recognize low energy, you can adjust your expectations for the conversation accordingly. When you see genuine enthusiasm, you can lean into topics that energize the person rather than draining them. This is how social perception accuracy transforms from abstract concept to practical capability. Not through theoretical study alone, but through deliberate practice in real relationships with real people. The hidden language of human emotion is being spoken constantly all around you. Most people never learn to hear it clearly. You're about to become fluent. Chapter 3. The Architecture of Strategic Connection. How intentional minds shape social realities. Most people stumble through social interactions like travelers without maps, hoping they'll somehow end up at desirable destinations. They want positive outcomes: respect, connection, influence, collaboration. But they have no systematic framework for creating those outcomes. They rely on personality, luck, or moment-to-moment improvisation, then feel confused and frustrated when results remain unpredictable. Strategic social intelligence operates from an entirely different paradigm. It recognizes that human behavior follows discoverable patterns, that connection can be engineered through deliberate application of psychological principles, and that influence emerges from understanding rather than chance. This doesn't mean becoming calculating or manipulative. It means becoming intentional. There's a profound difference between hoping people will respond positively and creating. Conditions where positive responses become natural and likely. Strategic thinkers understand this distinction and operate accordingly. The foundation of all strategic social influence is the principle of reciprocal exchange. Human beings are hardwired for reciprocity. When someone provides value to us, we experience psychological pressure to return that value. This isn't cultural conditioning or learned behavior. It's deeply embedded in our evolutionary psychology. For thousands of years, humans survived through mutual aid networks where reciprocity created the social bonds that kept communities functional and individuals alive. This reciprocity instinct still drives behavior in modern contexts, even though the stakes are rarely life and death. When someone does you a favor, you feel indebted until you can return the favor. When someone gives you a gift, you feel compelled to give something back. When someone invests time in helping you succeed, you naturally want to support their success in return. Strategic relationship builders understand this pattern and use it ethically by providing value first, consistently, and genuinely. They don't keep score or demand immediate returns. They understand that value provision creates goodwill that compounds over time and generates reciprocal support when needed. Value can be delivered in countless forms, and the most effective form varies by person and situation. Emotional support matters deeply to someone going through difficult times. Useful information becomes valuable to someone facing decisions in unfamiliar territory. Social connection helps someone who's new to a community or organization. Problem-solving assistance supports someone who's stuck on a challenge. Even simple positive attention provides value to someone who feels unseen or undervalued. The key is diagnosing what type of value each specific person needs most in their current circumstances, then delivering that value authentically and without strings attached. Someone struggling with a complex decision doesn't need cheerleading. They need clarity and perspective. Someone feeling overwhelmed doesn't need more information. They need calm reassurance and perhaps help prioritizing. Someone seeking validation doesn't need advice. They need acknowledgement and appreciation. When you consistently provide the specific type of value that each person actually needs, you become someone they naturally want to maintain connection with. Not because you're manipulating them, but because you're genuinely making their life better. Consider the principle of social validation. Humans look to others, especially similar others, to determine appropriate beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors. This explains why testimonials work, why everyone's doing it creates pressure to conform, and why association with respected individuals enhances your own credibility. When you can demonstrate that people similar to your conversation partner support your perspective, or that credible authorities endorse your position, or that successful individuals have made choices you're advocating, you dramatically increase your persuasive power. This isn't about manipulating through false consensus. It's about providing legitimate social proof that helps people feel confident making decisions. Strategic social thinkers build social proof systematically. They collect genuine success stories. They cultivate relationships with credible authorities in their field. They position themselves within respected communities and organizations. They create documentation of positive outcomes that others have achieved. This isn't vanity or self-promotion. It's creating legitimate evidence that reduces uncertainty and risk for people considering similar choices. The commitment and consistency principle drives behavior because humans have deep psychological needs to appear consistent with their previous statements, decisions, and identities. Once someone makes a commitment, especially a public commitment, they experience internal pressure to follow through. Breaking commitments creates cognitive dissonance, the uncomfortable tension between conflicting beliefs or between beliefs and actions. Strategic influencers help people make small commitments that lead naturally toward larger desired behaviors. A salesperson might ask someone to agree that quality matters more than price before presenting a premium option. A manager might ask team members to articulate their own reasons for a project's importance before assigning challenging tasks. A friend might ask you to acknowledge that exercise would improve your health before inviting you to work out together. This isn't trickery. It's helping people connect their own stated values and beliefs to specific actions that align with those values. When someone articulates their own reasons for doing something, they become much more committed than if you provide external reasons. Think about the last time you talked yourself into something versus being talked into it by someone else. Which decision felt more compelling? Which one were you more likely to follow through on? Your own reasoning always carries more weight than external pressure. Authority influences behavior because humans have evolved to defer to expertise and legitimate power structures. It's cognitively efficient and generally adaptive to trust those who know more about relevant topics. However, authority must be established before it can be leveraged effectively. Building authority requires demonstrating genuine competence consistently over time. You establish authority through sharing valuable insights that prove accurate, solving problems that others can't solve, making predictions that come true, or displaying credentials and expertise that establish your knowledge as superior in specific domains. The most powerful form of authority is earned expertise authority. People trust you because you've repeatedly demonstrated that you know more and think more clearly about relevant topics than they do. This can't be faked or claimed. It must be proven through consistent delivery of valuable perspective and accurate analysis. Olivia, a marketing consultant, built authority in her niche by publishing detailed case studies analyzing why certain campaigns succeeded while others failed. She didn't claim to be an expert. She demonstrated expertise through analysis that revealed insights others missed. Over 18 months, she became the go-to consultant in her specialty, not through self-promotion, but through consistent demonstration of superior understanding. The liking principle increases influence because humans prefer to say yes to people they know, respect, and feel connected to. But strategic liking isn't about being superficially pleasant or ingratiating yourself through flattery. It's built through discovering genuine commonalities, providing sincere appreciation for others' strengths, and working collaboratively toward shared goals. The most effective way to increase genuine liking is through collaborative problem solving. When you work with someone to overcome a challenge they care about, you create shared investment and mutual respect that transcends superficial social pleasantries. You become associated with positive outcomes and joint victories, rather than merely being a pleasant acquaintance. This explains why work friendships often become deeper than social friendships, and why teammates develop bonds that casual friends never achieve. Shared struggle and joint accomplishment create connection that small talk cannot. Scarcity motivates action because humans place higher value on opportunities that appear limited, exclusive, or time-sensitive. However, scarcity must be authentic to be effective and ethical. Creating false scarcity to manipulate decisions crosses the line from strategic influence to manipulative exploitation. Legitimate scarcity arises from genuine constraints. You truly do have limited time available for consulting. A particular opportunity genuinely will close at a specific deadline. Certain resources actually are in limited supply. When these constraints are real, communicating them clearly helps people make informed decisions without artificial pressure. The key to ethical scarcity communication is accuracy. State true constraints honestly without exaggeration or artificial urgency. I have 2 openings in my schedule this month. Is honest scarcity if it's true? This offer expires tonight. Is honest urgency if the deadline is real? Creating fake constraints to pressure decisions is manipulation, not strategic influence. Understanding these influence principles allows you to structure interactions for optimal outcomes intentionally. Instead of hoping people respond positively, you create conditions that make positive responses more likely. Instead of leaving influence to chance, you apply systematic frameworks that produce consistent results. But here's the crucial ethical boundary. These principles should be used to create mutual benefit, never to manipulate or exploit others. The goal is facilitating positive outcomes that serve everyone involved, not gaining advantage at others' expense. When you provide genuine value, build legitimate authority, create authentic connections, and communicate honestly about real constraints, you're not manipulating. You're collaborating effectively. You're making it easier for people to make decisions that serve their interests while also advancing your own goals. This is the essence of ethical influence, creating alignment between what benefits you and what benefits others, then helping people recognize that alignment clearly. Real strategic thinking involves considering multiple perspectives simultaneously. What do I want from this interaction? What does the other person want? Where do these interests overlap? Where do they conflict? How can I structure the conversation to maximize overlap and minimize conflict? Most people only think about their own goals during interactions. Strategic thinkers consider everyone's goals and look for solutions that advance multiple interests simultaneously. This doesn't mean compromising your own needs. It means finding creative approaches that serve everyone better than obvious solutions. Marcus wanted his team to adopt a new project management system, but he knew they would resist because learning new software feels like unnecessary work when current systems seem adequate. Instead of mandating the change through authority, he asked team members what frustrated them most about current workflows, identified several pain points: difficulty tracking dependencies, unclear ownership of tasks, and time wasted in status meetings. Marcus then demonstrated how the new system specifically addressed each of these frustrations. He wasn't selling the system based on his own priorities. He was showing how it solved problems his team actually cared about. The adoption rate was 100% within 3 weeks because team members saw the system as serving their needs, not just management's agenda. This is strategic thinking in action. Understanding what motivates others, connecting your goals to their interests, and framing proposals in terms of benefits that matter to them specifically. The concept of social capital explains why some people can make requests that get immediately approved, while others struggle to get basic cooperation. Social capital represents the accumulated goodwill, trust, and positive reputation you've built through previous interactions. Every time you help someone, deliver on a promise, demonstrate reliability, or solve a problem, You make deposits into your social capital account. Every time you ask for favors, challenge someone's ideas, require accommodation, or fail to deliver on commitments, you make withdrawals. Managing social capital requires balancing deposits and withdrawals strategically. If you make too many withdrawals without sufficient deposits, people become less responsive to your requests. They start avoiding you, minimizing interaction, or finding reasons to deny your requests because the relationship feels one-sided. But when you maintain a positive balance, consistently providing more value than you extract, people actively look for opportunities to help you. They want to maintain the relationship because it benefits them. They feel good about supporting you because you've supported them. This isn't transactional thinking in a cynical sense. It's realistic understanding of how relationships actually function. People maintain relationships that provide value and let relationships atrophy when they become burdensome or one-sided. Strategic relationship management means ensuring your relationships provide genuine mutual value over time. The highest level of strategic influence involves elevating others systematically. When you help people succeed, solve their problems, and contribute to their goals, they become invested in your success reciprocally. This approach builds genuine loyalty and creates mutually beneficial relationships that strengthen continuously. Instead of viewing influence as a zero-sum game, where your success requires someone else's failure, strategic thinkers recognize that the most powerful influence comes from expanding what's possible for everyone involved. When you make others more successful, you become associated with positive outcomes. When you help others solve problems, you become a valued resource. When you contribute to others' goals, you create allies who support your goals in return. This abundance mindset, there's enough success for everyone and helping others succeed helps me succeed, creates sustainable influence that compounds over time. You're not extracting value from relationships, you're creating value through relationships. Sarah, a senior product manager, transformed her influence within her organization by systematically helping other teams succeed. When engineering faced a technical challenge, she connected them with experts she knew in other companies. When marketing needed user research data, she shared findings from her team's recent studies. When sales struggled to explain product capabilities, she created simple documentation that made their jobs easier. She never asked for anything in return. She simply provided value wherever she saw opportunities to help. Within a year, Sarah had become one of the most influential people in a 500-person organization, despite having no formal authority over most teams. When she needed support for initiatives, people actively looked for ways to help because she'd established herself as someone who helped others succeed. That's strategic influence at its finest. Building genuine goodwill through authentic value provision, creating relationships based on mutual benefit, and becoming someone others naturally want to support because supporting you feels good and productive. Understanding strategic influence doesn't require becoming calculating or losing your authenticity. It requires recognizing how human psychology actually works, then operating within that reality intentionally, rather than hoping random approaches will somehow produce consistent results. The principles are simple. Provide value first. Build genuine authority through demonstrated competence. Create authentic connections through shared interests and collaborative problem-solving. Communicate honestly about real constraints and opportunities. Help others succeed, and they'll naturally want to help you succeed. These aren't manipulation tactics. They're frameworks for creating mutually beneficial relationships and interactions that serve everyone involved. When you approach influence strategically, while maintaining ethical boundaries and genuine care for others' well-being, you become someone others naturally want to connect with, collaborate with, and support. And that's when your social effectiveness transforms from random and frustrating to consistent and powerful. Chapter 4. Mastering your internal weather. Emotional regulation for external impact. Your emotional state in any given moment determines your social effectiveness more powerfully than any technique, framework, or strategy ever could. When you're calm, centered, and confident, you make better decisions, communicate more clearly, read situations more accurately, and influence outcomes more effectively. When you're anxious, reactive, or emotionally overwhelmed, even the most sophisticated social strategies fail to produce desired results. Most people treat emotions as events that happen to them, forces beyond their control that they must simply endure until they pass naturally. They feel anxious and assume they must remain anxious until the anxiety eventually fades. They experience anger and believe they have no choice but to express it or suppress it. They become overwhelmed and wait helplessly for the feeling to subside. This passive relationship with your emotional life severely limits your social power and personal effectiveness. Emotional regulation, the ability to recognize emotional states as they emerge, understand what triggered them, and consciously choose how to respond rather than reacting automatically, transforms you from someone controlled by emotions into someone who uses emotions strategically. The first level of emotional mastery is awareness. Most people experience emotions without accurately identifying them. They feel bad, but don't distinguish between disappointment, frustration, sadness, anxiety, or anger. Each of these emotional states provides different information about your needs and circumstances, and each requires different responses. Accurate identification becomes crucial for appropriate response. Developing emotional awareness requires creating space between triggers and reactions. When you notice an emotional shift beginning, pause deliberately and ask yourself 3 questions. What specifically am I feeling right now? What exact event or thought triggered this emotion? What is this emotion telling me about my needs or values in this situation? This simple practice, pausing to identify and understand rather than immediately reacting, creates the foundation for emotional regulation. You can't manage what you don't recognize. The second level involves understanding your personal trigger map. Certain situations, people, and topics predictably generate strong emotional responses in you. Some people trigger insecurity through comparison. Some situations activate perfectionism through performance pressure. Some topics engage your values so intensely that you become defensive or argumentative before you even realize it's happening. Mapping your triggers allows you to prepare for challenging situations in advance. When you know criticism typically makes you defensive, you can practice receiving feedback calmly before entering performance reviews. When you know conflict makes you anxious, you can develop specific strategies for staying centered during disagreements. When you know certain topics trigger disproportionate emotional responses, you can plan how you want to engage with those subjects rather than being ambushed by your own reactivity. Daniel, a litigation attorney, discovered that he became unreasonably aggressive during depositions when opposing counsel used condescending tones. His aggressive response damaged his effectiveness and his professional reputation. Once he mapped this trigger, he developed a pre-deposition ritual. He reminded himself that condescension was a tactic designed to provoke exactly the reaction he'd been having. By expecting it and reframing it as a predictable strategy rather than a personal attack, he could respond with calm professionalism that actually unsettled opponents more than aggression ever had. The third level is emotional reframing, consciously changing how you interpret emotional triggers. Instead of viewing criticism as an attack on your competence, you can reframe it as information for improvement. Instead of seeing conflict as threat, you can view it as an opportunity for deeper understanding and stronger resolution. Instead of interpreting questions as challenges to your authority, you can see them as engagement and interest. Reframing doesn't mean denying or suppressing emotions. It means choosing interpretations that serve your goals better than automatic interpretations. When someone challenges your idea in a meeting, you have choices about what that challenge means. You can interpret it as disrespect and become defensive, or you can interpret it as engagement and respond with curiosity. The external event is identical. Your interpretation determines your emotional response and behavioral reaction. The fourth level addresses physiological regulation. Emotions create physical changes in your body: increased heart rate, muscle tension, shallow breathing, stress hormone release. These physical changes then intensify emotional experiences, creating feedback loops where emotions trigger physical responses that amplify emotions further. Learning to manage these physical responses gives you greater control over emotional experiences. Breathing techniques provide the most accessible physiological regulation tool. When you breathe deeply and slowly, particularly when you extend your exhale longer than your inhale, you activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which naturally calms emotional arousal. The 4-7-8 technique works remarkably well. Inhale through your nose for 4 counts, hold for 7 counts, exhale through your mouth for 8 counts. Repeat this cycle 4 times. Within 2 minutes, you'll feel noticeably calmer as your physiology shifts from aroused to regulated. Progressive muscle relaxation interrupts the physical component of emotional reactivity. Starting with your feet and moving upward through your body, deliberately tense each muscle group for 5 seconds, then release completely. This process interrupts the physical tension that accompanies emotional stress and creates space for conscious emotional choice. The 5th level is strategic emotional expression. Once you can regulate your internal emotional state, You can choose how much and which aspects of your emotions to share with others. Sometimes expressing vulnerability builds connection. Sometimes maintaining composure demonstrates leadership. Sometimes showing passion inspires others. Sometimes displaying concern motivates action. Strategic expression means matching your emotional display to your social objectives in each specific situation. In negotiations, controlled intensity might be more effective than explosive anger. In supportive conversations, gentle warmth might be more helpful than enthusiastic excitement. In crisis situations, calm confidence might inspire more trust than visible stress. This doesn't mean being fake or manipulative. It means being intentional about how you express authentic emotions. You're not creating false emotions. You're choosing which genuine emotions to emphasize and how strongly to express them based on what each situation requires. The highest level of emotional regulation is emotional leverage. Using emotions as valuable information and powerful motivation rather than treating them as obstacles to manage. Anger signals violated boundaries or values and can motivate necessary boundary setting. Fear highlights important risks and encourages careful preparation. Frustration indicates blocked goals and can inspire creative problem-solving. Sadness reflects loss or disappointment and creates opportunities for processing and growth. When you view emotions as data rather than problems, you extract value from every emotional experience. Instead of trying to eliminate uncomfortable emotions, you ask what they're telling you and how you can use that information productively. Emotions aren't the enemy of effectiveness. They're the fuel for meaningful action when understood and channeled appropriately. Maya, an emergency room physician, used to view her anxiety before complex procedures as a weakness she needed to overcome. After learning emotional leverage, she reframed that anxiety as her mind's way of ensuring she was maximally alert and prepared. She started using pre-procedure anxiety as a trigger to review potential complications and verify that all necessary equipment was available. Her anxiety didn't disappear, but it became productive rather than paralyzing. Her complication rates dropped, and her confidence increased because she was working with her emotions rather than fighting against them. Mastering emotional regulation doesn't mean achieving some Zen-like state of perpetual calm. It means developing the capacity to recognize what you're feeling, understand why you're feeling it, and choose how to respond in ways that serve your goals and values, rather than being controlled by automatic emotional reactions. This mastery becomes your competitive advantage in every social situation. While others are buffeted by emotional reactivity, becoming defensive during criticism, aggressive during conflict, anxious during uncertainty, you remain centered, thoughtful, and strategic. You respond to situations as they actually are, rather than as your unregulated emotions distort them to appear. People notice this stability. They trust your judgment more because it's not clouded by emotional reactivity. They seek your presence during difficult situations because they know you'll remain stable when others become overwhelmed. They respect your leadership because you demonstrate emotional maturity that inspires confidence. Emotional regulation isn't about controlling others. It's about not being controlled by your own automatic responses. And that self-mastery becomes the foundation for every other form of social effectiveness you'll develop. Practice this starting today. In your next emotionally charged situation, pause before responding. Take 3 deep breaths. Identify exactly what you're feeling and what triggered it. Choose consciously how you want to respond rather than reacting automatically. That pause, that moment of conscious choice between trigger and response, that's where your power lives. That's where emotional regulation transforms from abstract concept to practical capability. That's where you stop being controlled by your emotions and start using them strategically. And once you master your internal weather, you'll discover that external social challenges become dramatically easier to navigate. Chapter 5. Building Genuine Rapport. The Psychology of Deep Connection. Rapport is the invisible foundation beneath every meaningful relationship and the prerequisite for genuine influence. Without rapport, your words lack impact. Your requests get dismissed. Your ideas get ignored. With deep rapport, people listen more carefully, trust more readily, and support more willingly. Most people approach rapport building through superficial techniques they've picked up from amateur psychology articles. Mirror the other person's body language. Find something in common to mention. Offer a compliment. While these surface-level tactics can create momentary connection, they don't build the deep rapport that transforms relationships and creates lasting influence. Authentic rapport emerges from something far more substantial: genuine understanding, shared experience, and mutual respect. It develops when people feel truly seen, heard, and valued for who they actually are, rather than for who they're performing to be. This level of connection requires moving beyond small talk and polite exchanges into meaningful communication about what actually matters. The foundation of authentic rapport is presence. Giving someone your complete, undivided attention, free from distractions and mental preoccupations. In our fragmented attention economy, where most people are simultaneously juggling devices, thoughts, and obligations, pure presence has become increasingly rare and therefore increasingly powerful. When you give someone your full attention, you communicate something profound without saying a word. You matter. What you're saying is important. I value this interaction enough to be completely here with you. This nonverbal message creates connection more powerfully than any technique or tactic. Developing presence requires practicing focused attention during conversations. Physically, this means putting away your phone, closing your laptop, turning away from other screens, and orienting your body toward the person speaking. Mentally, it means stopping the constant planning of your next response while they're talking, and resisting the urge to multitask mentally. Notice when your attention wanders, because it will. Your mind will drift toward your to-do list, toward something they said 3 sentences ago, toward planning what you'll say next. When you catch yourself drifting, gently redirect your attention back to the present moment and the person in front of you. This isn't a failure. This is the practice. Active listening builds rapport by demonstrating that you value the other person's thoughts and experiences enough to understand them fully. Active listening goes far beyond hearing words. It involves understanding emotions, recognizing motivations, and grasping meanings that aren't explicitly stated. It includes asking clarifying questions that help you understand more deeply, rather than questions that redirect conversation toward your own interests. It involves reflecting back key points to verify your understanding and give the other person a chance to refine or correct what they meant. It means exploring topics that matter to them rather than constantly steering toward subjects you find more interesting. The most powerful form of active listening is empathic listening, attempting to understand not just what someone is saying, but how they're experiencing their situation. When someone shares a challenge, your instinct might be to immediately offer solutions. But empathic listening requires first seeking to understand their emotional experience. How do they feel about this situation? What aspects concern them most? What outcomes would provide genuine relief or satisfaction? What have they already tried? What constraints are they operating within that might not be obvious from outside their position? Rachel, a team lead at a consulting firm, transformed her relationships with direct reports by shifting from solution-focused listening to empathic listening. Previously, when someone came to her with a problem, she would immediately offer advice based on how she would handle the situation. Her team members would nod politely, then often fail to implement her suggestions. After learning empathic listening, Rachel started asking questions before offering solutions. How are you feeling about this situation? What have you already considered? What constraints am I not seeing? What kind of support would be most helpful right now? She discovered that sometimes people didn't need solutions. They needed validation, perspective, or simply space to think out loud with someone who wouldn't judge them. Her team members started coming to her more frequently with challenges because conversations felt supportive rather than evaluative. Her actual influence increased dramatically because she was responding to what people actually needed rather than what she assumed they needed. Vulnerability creates rapport by demonstrating authenticity and inviting reciprocal openness. When you share something genuine about yourself, especially something that reveals challenge, growth, or learning, you create space for others to be authentic as well. This mutual authenticity forms the basis for deep connection that superficial pleasantries can never achieve. Strategic vulnerability involves sharing personal information that's relevant to the relationship and appropriate for the context. In professional relationships, you might share challenges you've overcome in your career or lessons you've learned from mistakes. In personal relationships, you might reveal fears, hopes, or meaningful experiences that shaped your perspective. In mentoring relationships, you might discuss your own struggles with issues your mentee is currently facing. The key is calibrating vulnerability to the relationship stage and context. Sharing deep personal struggles in a first conversation with a professional contact creates awkwardness rather than connection. Remaining perpetually guarded in close personal relationships prevents intimacy from developing. Appropriate vulnerability means matching disclosure depth to relationship depth while being slightly more open than feels completely comfortable. That's where growth happens. Value alignment creates profound rapport because it taps into fundamental human needs for belonging and meaning. When you discover that someone shares your core values, you feel understood at a level that shared hobbies or interests can never provide. Someone who shares your commitment to continuous learning, personal integrity, or service to others becomes naturally attractive as a relationship partner. Identifying value alignment requires asking questions that reveal what matters most to people beneath surface preferences and opinions. What motivates them to work hard when they could coast? What types of behavior do they find most frustrating in others, and why? What accomplishments in their life make them feel most proud? What changes would they most like to see in their community, organization, or industry? These questions reveal core values more accurately than surface questions about hobbies or weekend activities. Two people might both enjoy hiking, but one values hiking as achievement and challenge, while the other values it as connection with nature and escape from technology. That difference matters more than the shared activity. Shared experiences build rapport by creating common reference points and emotional bonds. When you go through something challenging, meaningful, or novel with another person, you develop connection that extends far beyond the immediate situation. This explains why team-building activities create bonding, why collaborative projects generate relationships that outlast the work itself, and why mutual support during difficulties creates loyalty that lasts for years. Creating shared experiences requires finding opportunities to do things together rather than merely discussing things. Work on a project together. Learn something new together. Volunteer for a cause you both care about. Help each other overcome challenges. Face a difficult situation together. Even simple activities like trying a new restaurant together or attending an event you're both interested in create shared memory and connection. The frequency and depth of shared experiences matter more than their duration. Meeting with someone for coffee every week for a year creates stronger rapport than spending an intensive week together once. Regular touchpoints build relationship infrastructure through accumulated shared experiences and demonstrated consistency. The highest level of rapport building is helping others become their best selves. When you consistently encourage someone's growth, celebrate their successes, recognize their progress, and support them through setbacks, you become associated with their positive development. This creates loyalty and connection that extends far beyond immediate circumstances. Supporting others' development requires understanding their goals clearly enough to recognize progress toward them. It means noticing when they demonstrate growth or improvement that they might not have noticed themselves. It means providing resources, connections, or perspective that helps them advance when they're stuck. Sometimes this means offering advice or introducing them to people who can help. Sometimes it means providing encouragement during difficult periods when they doubt themselves. Sometimes it means simply believing in their potential when they struggle to believe in it themselves. Michael, a software engineering manager, built exceptional rapport with his team by becoming genuinely invested in their individual growth trajectories. He had quarterly conversations with each team member about their career aspirations, not just their current project performance. He looked for stretch assignments that would develop skills they wanted to build. He introduced them to people in other departments who could teach them new capabilities. He celebrated their wins publicly and supported them privately through challenges. His team members didn't just work for Michael. They trusted him to care about their long-term success beyond their contribution to his immediate projects. When he eventually left to start his own company, 5 of his former team members asked to join him because the relationship was based on genuine investment in their growth, not just transactional work exchanges. Authentic rapport cannot be manufactured through techniques alone, but it can be cultivated through genuine interest in others, consistent supportive behavior, and willingness to be authentic yourself. When you approach relationship building with sincere desire to understand and support others, rather than merely to extract value from them, rapport develops naturally as a byproduct of genuine care and respect. The time investment required for deep rapport creation varies dramatically by individual and context. Some people open up quickly. Others require extensive time before sharing authentically. Some contexts encourage rapid connection through shared, intense experiences. Others require slow relationship building through repeated, low-key interactions over extended periods. The key is maintaining consistency over time rather than expecting instant rapport. Regular, genuine interactions build stronger relationships than sporadic, intense connections. This means developing sustainable relationship maintenance practices you can maintain long-term, rather than exhausting yourself with unsustainable relationship intensity. Rapport maintenance requires understanding that relationships atrophy without ongoing investment. But investment doesn't mean constant contact. It means periodic, meaningful connection that demonstrates continued care and interest. For close relationships, this might mean weekly conversations. For important professional relationships, monthly check-ins might suffice. For valuable but more distant connections, quarterly touchpoints can maintain rapport adequately. The maintenance investment should match the relationship's importance and the other person's preferences. Some people feel smothered by frequent contact. Others feel neglected without regular interaction. Calibrating to individual preferences demonstrates attentiveness and respect. Building genuine rapport transforms you from someone who knows many people superficially into someone who maintains a network of deep, mutually supportive relationships. These authentic connections become the foundation for collaboration, opportunity, support, and meaning in both personal and professional life. And unlike superficial networking tactics that feel manipulative and exhausting, authentic rapport building feels good because it's based on genuine human connection and mutual care. You're not using people, you're building relationships that enrich everyone involved. Chapter 6: Social Hierarchy Navigation. Reading and Influencing Power Dynamics. Every social situation contains invisible power structures that determine who gets heard, who gets respected, and whose preferences shape outcomes. Most people remain unconscious of these hierarchies, navigating interactions without understanding why some of their ideas get enthusiastically embraced, while identical suggestions from them get politely ignored. They focus on what they're communicating, while missing the crucial dynamics of who they are relative to others in the social structure, and how that positioning affects how their communication gets received and interpreted. Understanding social hierarchy isn't about manipulation or exploitation. It's about recognizing reality and operating effectively within it. When you can accurately assess power dynamics, you can position yourself strategically, communicate more effectively, and achieve better outcomes for everyone involved. Social hierarchies exist in every group: families, organizations, friend circles, professional associations, online communities. These hierarchies aren't always obvious or officially designated. The person with the most formal authority might not be the most influential. The quietest person might hold the most respect. The newest member might possess the most critical expertise. Identifying true influence requires observing behavioral patterns rather than relying on titles, tenure, or assumptions. Watch who speaks first in group discussions and whose contributions others wait to hear before forming their own positions. Notice who gets interrupted frequently and who never gets interrupted. Observe who makes suggestions that immediately get implemented and who proposes ideas that get politely acknowledged, then forgotten. These patterns reveal actual power structures more accurately than organizational charts or stated hierarchies ever could. Body language reveals hierarchical positioning with remarkable accuracy. Higher status individuals typically display more relaxed postures, occupy more physical space, and maintain direct eye contact while speaking and listening. They gesture with open palms, showing confidence rather than defensive closed positioning. Their movements are typically slower and more controlled, rather than nervous or rushed. Lower status individuals often display more closed postures, minimize their physical presence, avoid sustained eye contact, and show more nervous energy through fidgeting or rapid movements. However, these displays are contextual and situational rather than absolute or permanent. Someone might display high-status body language in professional settings where they're senior and respected, but defer completely in family situations where older relatives hold traditional authority. The same person might command space when discussing their expertise area, but become physically smaller when conversations shift to topics where they lack knowledge or confidence. Vocal patterns provide another reliable indicator of hierarchical positioning. Higher status individuals typically speak with lower, fuller vocal tones, slower pacing that suggests they're not rushed or anxious, and longer pauses between thoughts that communicate comfort with silence. They use declarative statements more frequently than questions, and rarely engage in uptalk, that rising intonation at the end of sentences that transforms statements into implicit questions seeking validation. Lower status individuals often speak faster, as if they need to get their words out before being interrupted, use higher pitch that signals nervousness or deference, and frequently seek validation through questioning tones even when making statements. They pepper their speech with qualifiers and hedges. I might be wrong, but this is just my opinion. I'm not sure if this makes sense. The most sophisticated aspect of hierarchy navigation is understanding that status can be fluid and situational rather than fixed. Rather than accepting permanent positions, strategic thinkers learn to raise their status appropriately for different contexts. In meetings where their expertise is directly relevant, they speak with confidence and authority, making declarative statements and sharing insights without excessive qualification. In situations where they lack specific knowledge, they ask intelligent questions that demonstrate engagement and analytical thinking without pretending to possess expertise they haven't developed. This adaptive approach to status displays demonstrates social intelligence rather than insecurity. You're calibrating your positioning to match your actual authority in each specific context, rather than maintaining a single, fixed status presentation regardless of situational appropriateness. Raising your status requires demonstrating genuine value consistently over time. You cannot simply decide to occupy higher status and expect others to recognize it immediately. Status elevation comes through proving competence, providing unique insights others don't have, solving problems others cannot solve, and consistently delivering on commitments so people learn your word is reliable. The most effective approach to status building is becoming genuinely valuable to the group or organization you're part of. When you consistently contribute ideas that prove effective, solve problems that actually matter, and help others succeed in their own objectives, your status rises organically. People begin deferring to your judgment, not because you've demanded it, but because experience has taught them your judgment is typically sound. Jessica, a junior analyst at an investment firm, initially struggled to be heard in meetings dominated by senior partners with decades more experience. Rather than trying to compete through speaking louder or more frequently, she focused on becoming indispensable through superior preparation and unique insights. Before every meeting, she researched thoroughly and identified one perspective or data point that others hadn't considered. She waited for appropriate moments, then shared her insights concisely and with quiet confidence. Over 6 months, the senior partners started specifically asking for her input because they'd learned she consistently brought valuable perspective they would have otherwise missed. Her formal position didn't change, but her status within the group elevated dramatically because she'd proven her unique value repeatedly. Another crucial aspect of hierarchy navigation is understanding alliance structures within groups. Most groups contain informal coalitions supporting different agendas, perspectives, or individuals. Identifying these alliances helps you understand why certain proposals get supported or opposed, regardless of their objective merit. Building strategic alliances requires providing genuine value to influential people and earning their trust over time. This doesn't mean being political in a manipulative sense. It means being genuinely helpful, reliably competent, and supportive of shared objectives. When influential people trust you and know you're capable, they naturally include you in important decisions and advocate for your interests. The concept of social capital explains why some people can make requests that get immediately approved, while others struggle to generate basic cooperation. Social capital represents the accumulated goodwill, trust, and positive reputation you've built through previous interactions. Every time you help someone, deliver on a commitment, solve a problem, or support others' success, you make deposits into your social capital account. Every time you ask for favors, challenge someone's ideas, require others to accommodate your needs, or fail to deliver on commitments, you make withdrawals. Managing social capital requires balancing deposits and withdrawals strategically. If you make too many withdrawals without sufficient deposits, people become less responsive to your requests. Your social capital account goes negative, and you lose influence and access. The highest level of hierarchy navigation involves elevating others strategically. When you help people succeed, solve their problems, and make them look good to others, they become invested in your success reciprocally. This approach builds genuine loyalty and creates mutually beneficial relationships that strengthen over time, rather than being purely extractive. Understanding hierarchy also means recognizing when hierarchical resistance will predictably occur, and planning accordingly. If your proposal threatens someone's status, power, or resources, they will likely oppose it, regardless of its objective merit. In these situations, you need strategies that allow people to maintain faith while supporting necessary changes. This might mean framing proposals so they align with the threatened person's stated priorities, giving them credit for aspects they contributed to, or finding ways for them to benefit from changes rather than only bearing costs. Strategic influence isn't about forcing good ideas through opposition. It's about structuring ideas so supporting them feels beneficial rather than threatening. The goal of hierarchy navigation isn't dominating others or climbing over them for personal gain. It's understanding social reality clearly enough to operate effectively within it. When you can read power dynamics accurately and position yourself appropriately, you become someone others naturally turn to for leadership, advice, and collaboration. You're not manipulating hierarchy. You're recognizing it, respecting it, and operating skillfully within it to achieve outcomes that benefit everyone involved. That's not manipulation. That's social intelligence in action. Chapter 7: Conversational Mastery: The Strategic Art of Meaningful Exchange. Conversation is the primary vehicle for connection, influence, and relationship building. Yet most people approach it without any systematic understanding of how effective dialogue actually works. They hope for engaging conversations rather than engineering them. They react to conversational dynamics instead of strategically guiding them. Mastering conversation requires understanding that dialogue operates on multiple levels simultaneously. There's the content level, the actual information being exchanged. There's the emotional level, the feelings being generated and shared. There's the relationship level, how the interaction affects the connection between participants. And there's the influence level, how the conversation shapes attitudes, decisions, and future behavior. Strategic conversationalists learn to operate effectively on all these levels at once. They provide valuable content while managing emotions, strengthening relationships, and creating positive influence. This multidimensional approach transforms ordinary exchanges into powerful opportunities for connection and impact. The foundation of conversational mastery is asking questions that create genuine engagement rather than superficial interrogation. Most people ask shallow questions that generate shallow responses. How was your weekend? Fine. How's your project going? Okay. These exchanges provide no real connection or useful information. Powerful questions probe deeper into experience, motivation, and meaning. Instead of asking someone about their job title, ask what aspects of their work give them the most energy or satisfaction. Instead of asking about their weekend, ask what they did that felt most meaningful or enjoyable. These questions invite people to share more interesting and authentic parts of their experience, rather than surface-level social pleasantries. The best conversationalists use a technique called progressive deepening, where each question builds on the previous response to explore topics more thoroughly. If someone mentions they enjoyed working on a particular project, you might ask what made that project especially engaging compared to their usual work. If they mention the collaborative aspect, you could explore what makes collaboration work well for them specifically, or what challenges they face in other collaborative situations. This approach demonstrates genuine interest while helping people articulate thoughts and feelings they might not have previously examined. When you help someone understand their own motivations and preferences more clearly through skillful questions, you provide real value that makes them want to continue the conversation. Strategic listening involves paying attention not just to what people say, but how they say it, what they don't say, and what those patterns reveal about their priorities and concerns. The topics someone discusses enthusiastically reveal their passions and values. The subjects they avoid or dismiss quickly indicate areas of discomfort, disinterest, or sensitivity. The emotions that appear when discussing different topics show what matters most to them emotionally, even if they don't state it explicitly. Calibrating your communication style to match each person's preferences dramatically improves conversational effectiveness. Some people prefer detailed explanations and comprehensive context. Others want concise summaries and key takeaways. Some enjoy philosophical discussions and abstract concepts. Others focus on practical applications and concrete examples. Some need time to process ideas internally before responding. Others think out loud through dialogue. Recognizing these preferences requires observing how people respond to different types of input. When you share a detailed explanation, do they lean in with interest or seem overwhelmed and eager to move on? When you ask about abstract concepts, do they engage enthusiastically or redirect toward concrete examples? When you pause to let them process, do they use that space thoughtfully or seem uncomfortable with silence? Adjusting your approach based on these responses creates much more satisfying interactions for both participants. You're meeting them in their preferred communication style, rather than forcing them to adapt entirely to yours. The rhythm and flow of conversation matters as much as its content. Effective conversations have natural ebb and flow, periods of intense engagement alternating with quieter reflection. moments of levity balancing deeper exploration, silences that allow ideas to settle, interspersed with active exchange. Managing conversational flow requires reading energy levels and adjusting accordingly. When someone seems mentally fatigued or emotionally drained, shifting to lighter topics or creating natural conclusion points shows consideration and social awareness. When energy is high and engagement is strong, diving deeper into meaningful topics maximizes the opportunity for connection and insight. Storytelling represents one of the most powerful conversational tools because stories engage emotions, create shared experiences, and make abstract concepts concrete and memorable. People remember stories long after they forget facts or arguments. They feel connected to storytellers who share meaningful experiences authentically and vulnerably. Effective storytelling requires structure, relevance, and emotional resonance. Good stories have clear beginnings that establish context, middles that develop tension or interest, and endings that provide resolution or insight. They include enough sensory detail to create vivid mental images without becoming tediously lengthy. They connect to themes or topics that matter to the listener, rather than serving only the storyteller's need to talk. The most powerful stories demonstrate vulnerability, growth, or learning. When you share a story about overcoming a challenge, learning from a mistake, or discovering something important about yourself or the world, you invite others to share their own meaningful experiences. This mutual vulnerability creates depth of connection that surface pleasantries can never achieve. Thomas, a sales executive, transformed his client relationships by replacing product presentations with relevant stories. Instead of listing features and benefits, he shared stories about other clients who faced similar challenges and how specific solutions addressed their needs. These stories made abstract capabilities concrete, generated emotional connection through shared experience, and helped clients envision their own success. His close rate increased by 40%, not because his products improved, but because his communication approach created genuine engagement rather than transactional information exchange. Conversational influence happens through strategic agreement building rather than argumentation. Instead of trying to convince people through debate, master conversationalists find areas of natural agreement and build from there. They identify shared values, common goals, or mutual interests, and use these as foundations for exploring areas where perspectives might initially differ. This approach works because people are much more receptive to new ideas when they feel understood and respected. When you demonstrate that you genuinely comprehend their perspective before sharing your own, they're more likely to consider your viewpoint fairly rather than defensively. Handling disagreement skillfully separates conversational masters from average communicators. Instead of becoming defensive or argumentative when someone disagrees with them, skilled conversationalists get curious about the disagreement. They ask questions to understand the other person's reasoning, look for valid points within different perspectives, and explore what underlying needs or concerns might be driving the disagreement. This doesn't mean abandoning your own convictions or agreeing with everything others say. It means creating space for different viewpoints to coexist while finding ways to bridge differences constructively. Often, apparent disagreements dissolve when people understand each other's underlying concerns and motivations, rather than just their surface positions. The conclusion of conversations affects how people remember and feel about the entire interaction. Ending conversations positively requires acknowledging what you appreciated about the exchange, summarizing key insights or agreements if appropriate, and creating clear next steps when relevant. Master conversationalists also know how to end conversations gracefully when they've run their natural course. They don't let good conversations drag on until they become awkward or forced. They recognize when meaningful exchange has occurred and create elegant transitions to closure that leave both parties feeling positive about the interaction. Conversational mastery transforms you from someone who passively experiences conversations into someone who actively creates meaningful exchanges. You're not manipulating dialogue, you're guiding it skillfully toward mutual benefit and genuine connection. And when you consistently create conversations that feel engaging, meaningful, and valuable to others, you become someone people actively seek out for connection and collaboration. That's when conversation becomes your most powerful tool for building relationships and creating influence. Chapter 8: Conflict Resolution and Difficult Conversations. Transforming tension into trust. Most people approach conflict with dread, anxiety, and the desperate hope that problems will somehow resolve themselves without direct confrontation. This avoidance strategy occasionally works for trivial issues, but it consistently fails for important relationships and significant problems. Unaddressed conflicts don't disappear. They metastasize, spread through relationships like poison, and eventually explode in ways that damage trust and outcomes far more than early intervention would have. The fear of conflict stems from misunderstanding what healthy conflict actually involves. Most people equate conflict with fighting, aggression, hostility, and emotional damage. They've witnessed or experienced destructive conflicts where people attacked each other's character, said things they couldn't take back, and permanently damaged relationships. They concluded that all disagreement is dangerous and should be avoided whenever possible. But productive conflict is entirely different from destructive fighting. Productive conflict focuses on solving problems and improving relationships rather than winning arguments or proving someone wrong. It addresses specific behaviors and situations rather than attacking personality or character. It seeks mutual understanding and collaborative resolution rather than victory and domination. When handled skillfully, conflict actually strengthens relationships by clearing the air, establishing healthier boundaries, and creating deeper mutual understanding. The relationships that feel most secure and satisfying are often those where people have successfully navigated disagreements together and emerged with stronger connection on the other side. The foundation of effective conflict resolution is separating the person from the problem. When someone's behavior creates difficulties, the issue is the behavior and its impact, not their fundamental worth as a human being. This distinction allows you to address problems directly while maintaining respect and care for the individual involved. Framing conflicts as shared problems to solve together rather than battles to win changes the entire dynamic. Instead of positioning yourself against the other person in opposition, you position both of you against the problem collaboratively. This shifts the energy from adversarial to cooperative and encourages creative problem-solving rather than defensive protection. Timing dramatically affects conflict resolution outcomes. Attempting to resolve conflicts when people are emotionally activated, stressed, exhausted, or distracted rarely produces good results. The best time for difficult conversations is when all parties are calm, reasonably well-rested, focused, and have adequate time to work through issues thoroughly without rushing. Creating the right environment for difficult conversations requires choosing appropriate settings and eliminating distractions. Private spaces reduce the risk of embarrassment and allow for more honest communication. Comfortable seating arrangements that don't create unnecessary power imbalances help people feel more relaxed and open. Turning off phones and closing laptops demonstrates respect and ensures full attention. The opening of difficult conversations sets the tone for everything that follows. Starting with acknowledgement of the relationship's value and expressing genuine intention to solve problems together creates a collaborative foundation. I value our working relationship and want to address something that's been creating tension between us works infinitely better than, "We need to talk about your problem." Avoiding blame, accusations, or inflammatory language in your opening prevents immediate defensive reactions. I've noticed that when deadlines get tight, communication seems to break down between us, creates more openness than, "You never communicate properly when you're under pressure." Effective conflict resolution requires understanding the difference between positions and interests. Positions are what people say they want, specific outcomes or solutions they're demanding. Interests are why they want it, the underlying needs, concerns, or values driving their position. Two people might take opposing positions about a specific solution while sharing underlying interests in fairness, respect, effectiveness, or security. When you focus on interests rather than positions, you often discover creative solutions that satisfy everyone's core needs, even though their initially stated positions seemed incompatible. Elena and Marcus, co-founders of a startup, had intense conflict about hiring decisions. Elena insisted on hiring experienced senior people even though they were expensive. Marcus demanded they hire promising junior people who fit their budget constraints. Their positions seemed irreconcilable. They couldn't afford both approaches. When they finally explored interests instead of positions, they discovered Elena's underlying concern was maintaining quality and credibility with investors who expected experienced teams. Marcus's deeper interest was preserving runway so they wouldn't run out of capital before achieving product-market fit. Once they understood each other's actual interests, they found a hybrid solution. Hire 2 senior advisors part-time to provide credibility and expertise without the cost of full-time executives, while building the core team with talented junior people who could grow into senior roles. This solution served both their interests, even though it matched neither of their original positions. Active listening becomes crucial during conflicts because people need to feel heard and understood before they can consider changing their positions or finding compromise. This doesn't mean agreeing with everything someone says, but it means demonstrating that you comprehend their perspective and acknowledge their concerns as legitimate from their point of view. Reflecting back what you hear serves multiple purposes. It shows that you're paying genuine attention and trying to understand. It gives the other person a chance to correct any misunderstandings before they compound. And it often helps them clarify their own thoughts and feelings, sometimes revealing that their initial position isn't actually what they most care about. So, if I'm understanding correctly, your main concern is that the current system creates confusion about who's responsible for what, and you're worried that ambiguity is causing important tasks to fall through the cracks. Is that accurate? This kind of reflection demonstrates understanding while giving them space to refine or correct your interpretation. Emotional regulation during conflict requires recognizing that strong emotions are normal and provide useful information, but they need to be managed appropriately rather than being expressed destructively or suppressed entirely. Anger often signals violated boundaries or values. Fear might indicate concerns about security or fairness. Frustration could reflect disappointment about unmet expectations. Acknowledging emotions without being controlled by them allows you to use emotional information constructively. When someone is clearly angry, you might say, "I can see this situation is really frustrating for you. Help me understand what's most important to you here so we can find a solution that addresses your core concerns." This validates their emotional experience while redirecting toward problem solving. You're not dismissing their feelings or demanding they calm down, but you're also not allowing the conversation to devolve into unproductive venting or attacks. The art of apology represents one of the most powerful conflict resolution tools when used appropriately and genuinely. Effective apologies acknowledge specific harm caused without minimizing or making excuses. They take responsibility for your actual contribution to the problem. They express authentic remorse, and they include commitment to different behavior in the future. I apologize for missing that deadline. I underestimated how long the analysis would take, and I should have communicated earlier that I was behind schedule. That put you in a difficult position with the client. Going forward, I'll update you immediately if I'm at risk of missing a commitment, so we can problem solve together rather than being blindsided. However, apologies must be earned and genuine to be effective. Apologizing for things you didn't do or aren't actually responsible for weakens your credibility and enables inappropriate behavior from others. The goal is taking appropriate responsibility for your actual contributions to problems, not accepting blame for everything to keep the peace. Finding common ground during conflicts requires looking beyond surface disagreements to shared values, goals, or concerns. Even in heated disagreements, people often care about similar things fundamentally: fairness, respect, effectiveness, security, or growth. Identifying these shared concerns creates a foundation for collaborative problem solving. I know we disagree about the approach, but I think we both want the same outcome: a system that's efficient, fair to everyone involved, and sustainable long-term. Can we start there and work backward to find an approach that achieves those shared goals? Generating solutions requires moving beyond either-or thinking toward creative alternatives that address everyone's core needs. Brainstorming multiple options before evaluating any of them prevents premature commitment to suboptimal solutions. The best resolutions often combine elements from different approaches in ways that nobody initially envisioned. Let's spend 10 minutes generating as many possible approaches as we can think of without judging them yet. Wild ideas are welcome. We can evaluate feasibility later. Right now, we're just trying to get everything on the table. Implementation agreements must be specific, measurable, and include accountability mechanisms. Vague agreements like "we'll communicate better" rarely produce lasting change because nobody knows exactly what better means or how to measure it. Specific commitments work. We'll have a 15-minute check-in meeting every Monday at 9 a.m. to align on priorities and surface any concerns early. If either of us can't make it, we'll reschedule within 24 hours rather than skipping it. The follow-up phase of conflict resolution often determines whether agreements actually produce lasting change or simply provide temporary relief. Scheduling specific times to evaluate progress, adjust agreements if necessary, and address new issues prevents problems from recurring or escalating. Let's plan to revisit this in 4 weeks and assess how the new system is working. If we're still experiencing issues, we'll adjust the approach rather than letting frustration build. Mastering difficult conversations requires recognizing that temporary discomfort during honest dialogue prevents much greater pain from unresolved problems festering over time. When you develop skill and confidence in addressing conflicts directly and compassionately, you become someone others trust to handle challenging situations constructively. People will seek you out when difficult conversations need to happen because they know you won't avoid necessary discussions or handle them destructively. That reputation becomes a powerful asset in both personal and professional contexts. Chapter 9: Social Positioning and Reputation Management. Creating your strategic identity. Your reputation precedes you into every social and professional interaction, powerfully influencing how others perceive your ideas, trust your judgment, and respond to your requests. Most people leave reputation to chance, hoping that good intentions and decent work will naturally create positive perceptions over time. This passive approach often fails because reputation isn't just about what you do. It's about how what you do gets perceived, interpreted, and communicated by others. Two people might perform identical work with identical quality, but one builds a strong reputation while the other remains unknown because of differences in how their work gets positioned and perceived. Strategic reputation management involves deliberately shaping how others think about your character, competence, and value. This doesn't mean creating a false image or manipulating others' perceptions dishonestly. It means ensuring that your genuine strengths, values, and contributions get recognized and remembered accurately, instead of being overlooked or misunderstood. The foundation of strong reputation is behavioral consistency that demonstrates your core values in action. When your actions consistently align with your stated principles across different contexts and over time, people learn to predict and trust your responses to various situations. This reliability becomes the basis for confidence in your character and judgment. If you say you value integrity, but cut corners when pressured, people notice the gap between words and actions. If you claim to prioritize collaboration, but take individual credit for team achievements, your stated values ring hollow. But when your behavior consistently reflects your professed values, even during difficult situations when compromise would be easier, your reputation for integrity becomes unshakable. Building reputation requires understanding that different audiences value different qualities. In professional settings, competence, reliability, and strategic thinking might be most important. Social settings, warmth, humor, and supportiveness might carry more weight. In leadership situations, vision, decisiveness, and integrity often matter most. The key is not becoming a different person for different audiences, but emphasizing different aspects of your authentic self based on what each context requires and values. Your core character remains consistent, while your presentation adapts to situational needs and audience expectations. Visibility plays a crucial role in reputation building because people can't appreciate qualities they never witness. Even exceptional work has limited reputational impact if it happens behind closed doors where nobody sees it. Strategic positioning requires finding appropriate ways to showcase your contributions, insights, and value to relevant audiences. This doesn't mean bragging or self-promoting in obvious ways that create negative reactions. It means ensuring that your best work gets seen by the right people at the right times. Speaking up in meetings when you have valuable insights to contribute. Volunteering for visible projects that showcase your capabilities. Sharing successes appropriately through status updates or reports. Presenting at conferences or publishing in relevant venues. Sophia, a data scientist at a mid-sized company, did exceptional analytical work that informed major business decisions. But executives rarely knew her name because her manager presented all findings as the analytics team's work. When Sophia started including brief analyst insights sections in reports that explained the thinking behind recommendations, executives began specifically requesting her involvement in strategic projects. Her work quality hadn't changed, but its visibility had increased dramatically. Association management affects reputation because people judge you partly based on who you choose to spend time with and align yourself with professionally and socially. Being consistently associated with respected, successful, and principled people enhances your own reputation through perceived similarity and affiliation. Conversely, regular association with people known for poor judgment, unreliability, or questionable ethics can damage your standing even if you personally maintain high standards. This isn't about being superficial in your relationships or abandoning friends who go through difficult periods. It's about being thoughtful about professional associations and understanding how different relationships might affect others' perceptions of your judgment and values. Expertise development creates reputation advantages because people naturally defer to those who demonstrably know more about relevant topics. Becoming genuinely expert in areas that matter to your personal or professional goals establishes you as a valuable resource and trusted authority rather than just another voice with opinions. Building expertise requires continuous learning, reading extensively, attending conferences, taking courses, seeking mentorship from those ahead of you, and staying current with trends and developments in your field. It means going deeper than surface-level familiarity to develop genuine mastery that others can recognize and respect. But expertise alone doesn't build reputation. You must also find ways to share your knowledge appropriately. Writing articles or blog posts, giving presentations at relevant venues, participating in expert panels or podcasts, or simply being the person others turn to for insights in specific areas. All these activities demonstrate expertise and build authority-based reputation. Communication style significantly impacts how others perceive your intelligence, competence, and leadership potential. Clear, confident communication enhances reputation, while unclear, hesitant, or overly aggressive communication undermines it, regardless of the quality of your actual ideas. Developing authoritative communication requires eliminating hedging language that undermines confidence in your statements. Instead of, "I think, maybe, we should probably consider possibly trying this approach," say, "I recommend we implement this approach because it addresses our main challenges effectively." However, authoritative communication must be balanced with appropriate humility and openness to other perspectives. The goal is confident expression of your views based on your knowledge and analysis, not arrogant dismissal of alternative possibilities or others' expertise in areas where they know more than you. Crisis management represents a crucial reputation skill because how you handle difficult situations often defines how others perceive your character and capabilities more powerfully than routine interactions. People forget many ordinary moments, but they remember vividly how you responded during pressure, conflict, or failure. Effective crisis management requires taking appropriate responsibility without unnecessary self-flagellation or melodrama, focusing on solutions rather than dwelling on problems, maintaining calm professionalism even under stress, and learning visibly from the stakes rather than making excuses or blaming others. When you handle crises well, you actually strengthen your reputation because people see evidence of your character under pressure, the truest test of who someone really is. But when you handle crises poorly, through blame shifting, panic, or dishonesty, you damage trust that takes years to rebuild. The concept of reputation maintenance involves protecting the positive reputation you've built while continuing to strengthen it over time. This requires consistent behavior aligned with your values, careful attention to how your actions might be perceived, and quick correction of any misunderstandings that might damage your standing. Long-term reputation building requires understanding that reputation functions like a bank account. Every positive interaction, successful project, and demonstration of good character makes deposits. Every mistake, conflict, or disappointing outcome makes withdrawals. Maintaining a positive balance requires consistently making more deposits than withdrawals over time. The most sophisticated aspect of reputation management is understanding how reputation creates opportunities. When you are known for specific strengths and qualities, people naturally think of you for relevant opportunities. Strong reputation becomes a competitive advantage that opens doors, creates partnerships, and generates support for your initiatives. Strategic reputation building also involves helping others succeed and build their own positive reputations. When you consistently support others' growth, celebrate their successes publicly, and help them overcome challenges, you become associated with positive outcomes and generous character. This approach creates a network of people who are invested in your success because you've been genuinely invested in theirs. They become natural advocates who promote your reputation to others and create opportunities for you because they want to reciprocate the support you've provided them. Your reputation is one of your most valuable assets. Protect it carefully, build it deliberately, and leverage it strategically to create the personal and professional life you want. Chapter 10: Group Dynamics and Social Leadership. Influencing collective behavior. Understanding group dynamics represents the difference between being swept along by collective behavior and strategically influencing group outcomes. Groups operate according to psychological principles that differ significantly from individual psychology. People behave differently in groups than they do alone, and these differences create both opportunities and challenges for those who understand how to navigate them effectively. Every group develops its own culture, implicit rules, and behavioral norms that powerfully shape individual behavior within the group, often without conscious recognition from members. These cultural elements determine what behaviors get rewarded or punished, what topics can be discussed openly versus those that remain unspoken, and what values the group actually prioritizes regardless of what it claims to value. People who would never interrupt in one-on-one conversations might regularly interrupt in groups where that behavior has become normalized. Individuals who are naturally collaborative might become competitive in groups that reward individual achievement over collective success. Someone who values honesty might remain silent about problems in groups where speaking up gets punished through social exclusion or professional consequences. Understanding these cultural dynamics allows you to recognize which behaviors will be rewarded or punished within specific groups and adjust your approach accordingly. More importantly, it enables you to influence the development of group culture in directions that serve everyone more effectively. Social leadership within groups doesn't require formal authority or designated positions. It emerges from understanding group needs and consistently providing value that helps the group achieve its objectives. Social leaders become influential because they solve problems others can't solve, facilitate collaboration others can't create, and provide direction when groups become uncertain or fragmented. The foundation of social leadership is reading group energy and emotional states accurately. Groups, like individuals, have collective moods that shift based on recent events, external pressures, and internal dynamics. Sometimes groups feel energized and optimistic, ready to tackle ambitious challenges. Other times they feel frustrated, discouraged, or fragmented. Effective social leaders learn to calibrate their approach to match group emotional states. When a group feels overwhelmed, providing clarity and breaking complex challenges into manageable steps helps restore confidence. When a group lacks energy, identifying quick wins or celebrating recent successes can restore momentum. When a group feels fragmented, highlighting common ground and shared purpose can rebuild cohesion. Group communication patterns reveal power structures, influence relationships, and decision-making processes more clearly than organizational charts or stated procedures. Observing who speaks first in discussions, who gets interrupted, and who never gets interrupted, whose ideas get developed and implemented versus whose suggestions get politely acknowledged, then forgotten. All these patterns provide valuable information about actual group hierarchies and dynamics. Strategic communicators position themselves effectively within these patterns. They speak at moments when their contributions will have maximum impact rather than talking constantly. They build on ideas that have already gained group acceptance rather than opposing everything. They support worthwhile suggestions from others to build coalition relationships rather than only promoting their own ideas. The concept of social proof operates powerfully within groups because people look to others, especially similar or respected others, to determine appropriate behavior and attitudes. When influential group members support an idea or approach, others become much more likely to support it as well, even if they had initial reservations. This principle explains why gaining early support from influential group members is so important for any initiative. If you can get respected voices in the group to endorse your proposal before presenting it broadly, other members are more likely to support it because they're following the lead of people they trust and respect. Building coalitions requires identifying natural allies who share your goals or values and working with them to create broader support. Coalition building isn't about manipulation. It's about finding genuine alignment and collaborating toward shared objectives. When multiple people advocate for similar positions, the group perceives that position as having broader support and legitimacy. Group decision-making processes vary significantly, and understanding the specific process used by each group determines how to influence outcomes effectively. Some groups make decisions through formal voting. Others through consensus building, where everyone must agree. Still others through deference to authority figures who make final choices. In voting-based systems, building majority support requires understanding what motivates different members and addressing their concerns effectively. In consensus-based systems, finding solutions that address everyone's core needs becomes crucial. In authority-based systems, influencing the decision-maker directly might be more effective than trying to sway the entire group. Conflict dynamics within groups require different approaches than individual conflicts. Group conflicts often involve multiple parties with different perspectives, coalition structures that complicate simple resolution, and audience effects that make face-saving more important because disagreements play out publicly. Effective group conflict resolution requires understanding all parties' positions and underlying interests. Identifying common ground that can serve as a foundation for agreement, and creating solutions that allow everyone to maintain dignity while achieving core objectives. The role of group facilitator represents one of the most powerful forms of social leadership, because facilitators shape how groups process information, make decisions, and interact with each other. Good facilitation helps groups achieve better outcomes while creating positive experiences for all participants. Facilitation skills include managing speaking opportunities fairly so everyone's voice gets heard, keeping discussions focused on relevant topics rather than wandering into tangents, summarizing key points to ensure shared understanding, and helping groups reach closure on decisions rather than endless discussion without resolution. These skills make you valuable to any group and naturally position you for leadership roles even without formal authority. Innovation and change within groups requires understanding resistance patterns and change dynamics. Groups tend to resist changes that threaten established relationships, disrupt comfortable routines, or create uncertainty about outcomes. Overcoming this resistance requires demonstrating clear benefits, addressing legitimate concerns, and implementing changes gradually, when possible, to reduce perceived risk. The most effective change agents within groups start by building credibility through consistent value provision. They identify early adopters who are naturally open to new approaches. They create small successes that demonstrate the value of proposed changes. And they help others see how changes serve their interests rather than only benefiting the change agent. Group motivation requires understanding what drives collective energy and commitment. Groups become motivated when they have clear, shared goals they believe are achievable and meaningful. When they believe their efforts will make genuine difference, and when they feel supported in their work rather than criticized or micromanaged. Creating these motivating conditions becomes a primary responsibility of social leaders, whether or not they hold formal leadership positions. Recognition and celebration play crucial roles in maintaining group motivation over time. Acknowledging individual contributions publicly shows people their work matters and is noticed. Celebrating group achievements creates positive shared experiences that strengthen bonds. Connecting current efforts to larger purposes helps people see meaning in their work beyond immediate tasks. The highest level of group leadership involves developing other leaders within the group rather than centralizing all influence in yourself. Empowering others to take initiative, make decisions, and contribute their unique strengths creates stronger, more resilient groups that don't depend entirely on any single individual. This distributed leadership approach requires confidence in your own value and genuine commitment to group success over personal recognition. When you consistently help others develop their capabilities and succeed in visible ways, you become associated with group effectiveness and naturally maintain influential positioning even as you share leadership with others. Mastering group dynamics transforms you from someone who hopes groups will function well into someone who actively shapes group culture, facilitates effective collaboration, and influences collective outcomes toward better results for everyone involved. Chapter 11. Integration and Mastery. Your Path Forward. You've discovered that what you called social awkwardness was never a fixed personality trait. It was simply underdeveloped skills waiting to be learned. Emotional intelligence, strategic influence, genuine rapport, conflict resolution, and social leadership aren't mysterious gifts. They're learnable competencies that transform through practice. The frameworks you've explored, reading emotional landscapes, managing your internal state, navigating power dynamics, mastering conversations, building authentic connections, These aren't manipulation tactics. They're tools for becoming authentically powerful in your relationships and interactions. Integration happens when these skills become natural rather than conscious techniques. When emotional regulation becomes automatic. When reading social dynamics feels effortless. When building rapport flows genuinely. When influence emerges from authentic value provision rather than forced persuasion. This journey requires consistent practice. Start with one skill, perhaps emotional awareness or active listening. Practice deliberately in low-stakes situations until it becomes natural. Then add another layer, then another. Competence builds gradually through accumulated practice, not through sudden transformation. Remember, the people you admire socially weren't born different. They simply learned skills you're now learning. Every conversation is practice. Every interaction is opportunity. Every challenge is growth. Your social effectiveness transforms when you shift from identifying as someone who struggles socially to someone developing social mastery. That identity shift changes everything. You stop making excuses and start making progress. You stop avoiding challenges and start seeking growth opportunities. The goal isn't perfection. It's progress. It's becoming more skilled, more confident, more effective with each interaction. It's building relationships that enrich your life and others' lives. It's creating influence that serves everyone involved rather than exploiting anyone. You're not becoming someone different. You're becoming the most effective, authentic, and positively impactful version of yourself in relationship with others. This journey enriches not only your own life, but also the lives of everyone who has the privilege of meaningful connection with you. The frameworks are yours. The practice begins now. The potential is limitless. Welcome to your new social reality, one where connection flows naturally, influence emerges authentically, and relationships become your greatest source of meaning, opportunity, and joy. Your transformation isn't about mastering others. It's about mastering yourself in the presence of others. And that mastery? That's where true social intelligence lives.